So Nintendo just recently completed some major online server maintenance for the Switch, and it has a lot of people online discussing if this means anything more and if we are around the corner for maybe some new Switch online features that are much needed. So we have to talk about that today. And then the ever-present Switch Pro rumors are ramping up again as we have the president of Nintendo actually acknowledging the system. So I want to read through what he said and what it could mean as far as Nintendo's plan to eventually release the Switch Pro. What's up, nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, the first thing we are talking about today is Nintendo Switch Online, as there is a lot of people discussing this online since the recent updates that have gone out to the Switch console, as we have Oatmeal Dome actually outlining what servers were worked on, and a bunch of people tended to notice the fact that this was like all of Nintendo's online infrastructure. As you see, he tweeted out that they worked on friend notifications, save data backup in Animal Crossing, the eShop game update data, and firmware downloads, and even parental controls. So that's really something that's kind of uncommon for Nintendo as far as working on every major service that the Switch has to offer when it's tied to online, especially at one specific time. Now, if you guys do recall, we recently covered on the channel some of the issues that people were having with an error download code after a firmware update got pulled from Nintendo, and it very well could be related to that, but they did seem to clear up that issue with previous server maintenance that they did the week before, but maybe it didn't totally eradicate it for every scenario on the Switch, and that's all this was. Now, on the other front, you also just had Nintendo's investor meeting take place, and we had some comments from Furukawa himself around what their plans may entail when it comes to Switch Online, so I do want to read through that before we get into kind of the discussion of whether or not we can expect any updates or changes around the corner. So the first question that came out of the investor meeting in relation to Nintendo Online service is the following: are you thinking of improving the Nintendo Switch Online service? Furukawa responded, as hardware sales increase along with the number of subscribers, we would like to strive for those who are already subscribers to continue to use the services. Then the next question in reference to the Nintendo Switch Online service was the following: what will you do to attract the next generation of parents as a way to expand the audience with your IP? The NES Mini was really good. Are there plans to expand Nintendo Switch Online beyond the NES and Super NES? Furukawa replied, I will refrain from elaborating on the subject, but we have been making games for 35 years and for many generations. We welcome your valuable feedback on the mini series. Now, his first answer was obviously very vague and just saying that they will try to do things to keep subscribers, which obviously, if you have a fan base or some kind of subscription-based service, you're always going to have to be updating that to keep people entertained and engaged with it. And it's kind of an obvious statement. There wasn't really too much there, but I do want to talk about the second question that he answered, which was in reference to kind of the mini consoles, but the person actually did say, you know, do you plan to expand beyond NES and SNES on the online service? And, you know, he actually kind of focused on the fact that the person mentioned the mini consoles and said, you know, we thank you for your valuable feedback around the mini console. Now, does that mean that we are around the corner from an N64 mini? It's possible, but I do think that Nintendo's kind of like let it die at this point, just because of the simple fact that they really did shift focus to the online service. Because if you bought an NES mini or an SNES mini like I did, you can now pretty much play the majority of those games, the same games that are featured on those consoles, on your SNES or NES online service if you are a subscriber on the Nintendo Switch. So that it does kind of make it, you know, a defeating purpose to release that kind of console if you know that the same fans are going to go ahead and purchase, you know, your online subscription where all of those will be included. So will they release an N64 mini and then turn around and add that service to online? Well, it is possible. I do think it's time that we actually see some major updates come from Nintendo. And while this isn't confirmation that they're about to drop new consoles or new functionality of any sort, I do think you have to have that conversation now, as we are now well into the new generation of gaming with the PS5 and the Series X, and the kind of, you know, just basic functionality when it comes to party invites, being able to create a chat room with your friends and actually have a conversation with them directly on the console itself, and not have like a silly phone app that nobody downloads or uses at all. I mean, Nintendo really does need to slow down and get with the times on their online service, which they always have historically struggled with. Like, we've never seen them be a leader in online services, but we do see them eventually play catch up, as now we are seeing them do things like DLC and even day one patches that, you know, before was not a thing that Nintendo would ever do. They wouldn't ship the game until it was 100% finished. So they are slowly falling into this new environment where they tweak things and update things as they go, but they are clearly lagging behind. And I think, for one, as somebody who has had a Nintendo online subscription for quite some time, that I'm really ready for some major overhaul and updates, and hopefully we see some of these launch along something like a Switch revision, as I do think that would be a good time to do it. But I want to know from you guys what you think we need the most, and which in which order would you like to see them announced? Because personally, I think we have to have themes and folders. We have to have some kind of new console functionality added to the online Switch service, which is more of just a bonus feature, but I do think it will be nice. I mean, the Switch is the best console to play a ton of classic games on because you can take it with you on the go. I would love to be traveling and be able to play through Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, while I'm on a plane or traveling anywhere or just out and about. I would love to have that option. Those are great pick up and play and pause and rest games. And I think it makes a lot of sense for something like N64 or even Game Boy Advance to debut on an online service. And they could even charge me a little bit more if they add in enough consoles. Hopefully one day we could be talking about, GameCube titles in that conversation as well. But it's all up to Nintendo at this point. That did clearly, reference that they're planning some stuff for online, but didn't give us a lot in the way of what to expect and how soon to expect it, because there was a ton of rumors that at E3 we would at least see them acknowledge their Switch online service. That did not happen. I do want to point out though that Nintendo is kind of forming more of a media style of just surprise dropping things on Twitter. Like, they're not having everything announced at these directs. So I do think that something like a major online overhaul could just be a trailer that drops on Twitter one day, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later. I do want to know what features you guys hope to see the most from Switch Online, and then also how soon do you think that we are around the corner from this update? And do you think that the server maintenance that recently happened had anything to do with that, or is that just totally unrelated to what Nintendo could be working on when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online? Now, the other thing we're talking about today is obviously a topic that's extremely divisive, and there's a lot of reason to be exhausted on this topic, and I totally get it for the fans that don't want to hear about it anymore. But the fact and the reality is it's so out there and so close to being confirmed at this point that we're continuing to see it brought up in just about any of these type of Q&As, and they've been asking this question from the beginning of the year, even before that till now. And I do want to point out how Furukawa is starting to slowly change his tune on how he acknowledges the Switch Pro or the next hardware for the Switch lineup. And if you guys don't think it's happening at all, that's fair, that's fine. You don't have to watch this portion of the video, but I do think that it lines up with how Nintendo does mid-cycle refreshes, especially in the handheld market, as they've done that historically through the Game Boy line and the DS line without fail. So I think they're absolutely going to do the same thing here. There's no reason to not give us a beefed up Switch, especially whenever you might have to deal with Nvidia potentially phasing out the Tegra 1 processor that is in the Switch base model. So at some point this upgrade might be inevitable. But I do want to first read through Furukawa's statement around the Switch Pro when he was asked this specifically at this investor meeting. The Splatoon 3 announcement was good, and it was a relief to learn that support for Nintendo Switch will continue next year. There were reports of new Nintendo Switch, but there was no announcements during E3, and the share price dropped significantly. Is there anything that can be done when rumors arise? Is there really a new model of this console? Furukawa then responded, "We will release information at the appropriate time. I will refrain from commenting on a new model. However, we will continue to aim to bring new ways to play in the future, so we will reveal our plans in due course." The one thing you do have to take into account with these investor meetings, as this is of course being translated, so there is some possibility that exactly word for word what he said is not kind of how it is intended to us in the English language, and there's no telling on his true intent behind his statement. But it does appear that he is saying like, well, listen, we're working on new stuff. Obviously Nintendo always is. We'll announce it when the time is right. There's not really a way to control rumors and speculation that pop up online, and so it is one of those things that it's just like it's kind of a blanket statement to address how Nintendo will handle it, which obviously Nintendo has always done that. They don't get pressured by the crowd. They literally do what they want when they want, and it has worked for them tremendously well up to this point in time. So I expect the same going forward. But I do want to point out the fact that earlier in the year we had this same question asked in the same exact format, and Furukawa would legitimately say we have no new plans for hardware of any type at any point in time, and for the foreseeable future there is no new plans for hardware, versus now he saying, I'm going to refrain from commenting on the new hardware, and when the time is right, we will make an announcement. And that's really where we're at with this entire situation. I still tend to believe the Bloomberg reports. I think they went out way too far on a limb saying that they think it would be revealed before E3, but whenever you're talking about production reports of, you know, Samsung 7-inch OLED displays being ordered to Nintendo, potentially starting, you know, production as soon as July, you have all of those reports floating around. You have all of the different, you know, timelines of it potentially being announced in September or October. I think that that's totally possible. It's also very possible that we see this thing stacked up as a system seller alongside of Breath of the Wild 2 next year in 2022, whenever that decides to, you know, eventually come out. And that may even be a towards the end of 2022 thing. But if Nintendo is smart, I think because the Switch is clearly halfway through its life cycle, it's about time for us to get a beefed up version with a better OLED display for handheld, and then really hopefully just some, you know, clever upscaling to like 4K to be current with the new TVs, because you could not go buy a 1080p unless it's pretty much used nowadays on as far as the HD TV market. So I do think that it makes sense, and it's about time for Nintendo to get their specs up to the 4K standard when docked, and then really just have, you know, some of these higher fidelity games possible on the Switch that aren't there today, because we're already seeing some even first party Nintendo titles struggle with frame rates on the base model Switch, and that's definitely something that can be addressed with a better chipset. Now, that's besides all of the data miners that have actually found code names for new, you know, chip technology, and even for a dock that enhances the base model of the Switch. So, you know, it's one of those things that, like, there's a lot of information pointing to the Switch Pro being real, and I totally get how a lot of fans are exhausted on the topic. But as this, you know, new information does come out and we get, for, you know, further updates and developments from Nintendo's leaders, I will continue to cover it here on the channel, just because I think it's worth talking about. And, you know, if you're maybe one of those people right now that you're right on the line of purchasing a Switch or not, there's obviously no clear direction to go to say, like, okay, it's right around the corner, it's definitely coming out this fall, or it could be next year. Like, we are not going to know from Nintendo until, I think, the most credible thing that we're gonna see sometime in the near future, if these Bloomberg reports were correct, which I still believe they are, I think we will begin to see leaked screenshots, just like what happened with the Switch Lite, right around the corner. Like, I mean, if they're going into production in July and this thing is going to be mass produced, you're going to have a ton of employees on an assembly line that will have smartphones, and that somebody will, you know, be ballsy enough to take the photo and upload it online. And I think that that's going to happen, and that's probably when we will start to get some real confirmation around this thing being real. And it was really funny that even though the Switch Lite photos leaked out, people still did not believe that that console was coming. Furukawa himself said that that was not even, you know, there's no Lite coming, there's no plan for new hardware or for smaller hardware, and then, you know what, it drops. So I think we do the same thing with the Switch Pro. But really, at this point in the video, guys, I want to get all your opinions on everything we talked about today. Again, what are your most wanted Switch Online features, and in which order do you hope we receive them? And do you think this firmware update really did mean anything when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online as a service right now? And then in terms of Furukawa's statements on the Nintendo Switch Pro, I would love to know if you think that, you know, this is him changing his tune and really getting us ready for a potential quick release, or if you're just kind of in the camp that you're like, I don't want to hear about this thing anymore until Nintendo releases it officially, and that's that. So please share all your thoughts on that stuff in the comments down below with me, and then do hop over to the community tab today, where I will be asking you guys in a poll, you know, a kind of around the Nintendo Switch Online service features that we need and which ones you guys want the most. Thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. I do truly appreciate you all sticking around until the end. I do at this point in the video want to invite you all one more time to join Sunbro Nation if you haven't done so already. Do so by subscribing below, hit the like button on your way out on this video if you enjoyed it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. That's gonna do it for me, guys. I hope you all have a great day. Sunbro Nation, out.